Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Developer Ecosystem or SharePoint Developer Community Call, also known as SharePoint Bmp Community Call. This is the July 2018 edition, so it's July 10th. It's summertime, at least in the northern hemisphere of the globe, which means that a lot of people are actually enjoying their vacation times and all of that. In past, this is the first time ever we actually have a monthly community call in July for SharePoint Bmp, and we've been running this now for 4 years or so. We typically always cancel the July because people are always away. So, but then again, depending on where are you located in the globe, it might be actually the winter time. So it's not like everybody is on vacation right now. Now let's concentrate on today's topic anyway. So it's not about telling what's the weather out there. It's about concentrating on the SharePoint developer topics. And let me actually enable my clicker, which is out of battery. So I need to actually click in keyboard. I'm going to fix this one while I'm talking. If I can actually change the slides. Yes, I can. Cool. So today we have some SharePoint developer news. So some, let's say, some news related on engineering work, what we're doing. There are some updates on the roadmap. So some of this I already actually explained last week in the last week's Thursday's call, which was the community special interest group call around SharePoint Framework. So we talked about the SharePoint 2019, but there's an updated slide on that one in today's call as well. SharePoint 2019 is going to go for preview relatively soon. So I cannot, I do not remember even the exact date by myself, but it's happening relatively soon. So you'll see an update on that. But in this call, we're going to talk about what is the dev platform supportability within the SharePoint 2019. Then we also have two cool demos coming up today. One for Luis Manes, which is around using Microsoft Graph custom schema extensions with SharePoint Framework. Really cool capability, as it's actually accessing the graph and accessing the custom schema definitions there and showing stuff. So Louis is going to start, and then we're going to have a demo around the SharePoint Starter Kit, the expanding footer, which we have on the SharePoint Starter Kit from Paolo Pialorsi. And that's really around explaining how you can actually extend out of the communication sites as well, because the modern experiences do support customizations. And most likely, hopefully, let's see, we'll have some time for Q&A today as well. I'm trying to actually watch the IAM window as we move along, but let's see if we can follow up on the what's actually happening from a questions perspective. Now, quickly explaining how the SharePoint developer community actually works. So we do have different layers of SharePoint developer community engagement. So you can only engage using a social media. You can go, for example, the SharePoint developer group or space in the Microsoft Tech community, AKMS Bmp community or SP Dev community, and that's going to be the location to have a discussion, ask questions. You can see engineering people like me, and if I have time, every now and then I don't have time, unfortunately, we're able to then answer those questions there. So, but it's more like a forum to have questions and discussions. Then we have bi-weekly SharePoint Framework community call, which is around the SharePoint Framework and client-side development. So you can actually see cool demos and hear about the latest on SharePoint Framework, and we also talk about Office 365 CLI, reusable SPFX controls in those calls, and how they are moving along, because those are open source initiatives. Then we have also bi-weekly special interest group call around SharePoint General Dev, and this isn't really that precisely defined what it is, but it's everything else other than SharePoint Framework. But nowadays we also include here the Microsoft Flow and the Power Apps capabilities. So every one of these calls have also a demo around Microsoft Graph and Power Apps in the context of SharePoint, because those are getting a lot of love internally from the engineering side, and we want to show you how things are evolving. But there's also additional stuff like what's new in CSAM, what's new in PnP PowerShell, and architectural designs. And then we have this monthly community call. So if you don't have any time to follow up on what's happening in the SharePoint developer community, jump on these monthly community calls, and we'll do a quick summary, what has happened in the past, who's contributed, who's done what, and then a few cool demos in this as well. Now, a few numbers from June 2018, just to show you that there are other people who are interested in what's happening on the SharePoint developer community. So in YouTube, we actually did an all-time record. In YouTube, we had 185,000 watch time minutes with 31,000 views in the SharePoint developer YouTube channel. So pretty cool numbers. We're hitting roughly 1.8 million minutes watch time in a year, which is already a pretty decent number. It's kind of a pity that we can't really sell ads on these videos, and that would kind of be not acceptable, so completely understandable. In GitHub, the unique visitor numbers are growing quite fast as well, so it's cool to see that people are finding the GitHub and they're able to access the information in GitHub, because there's a lot of ready-to-use samples, scripts, tooling available for you to take advantage. So we had a 42,000 or 43,000 unique visitors with 202,000 views in Ignite. In the docs, we had 860,000 views, so that's slightly down from May, but that is as expected as well as we move along at the spring and summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. And then on the Bmp Reusable Components, we did a all-time records on the unique tenants. It's 13,300 tenants in a month who were using Bmp PowerShell or Bmp Js Core or Bmp Js functionalities, and they generated more than 10 billion HTTP requests within the June. So that's a first time ever we actually break the 10 billion limit, which is pretty cool for the team to see that the adoption and approval of open source in the SharePoint context is growing all the time. And most used capabilities is absolutely the remote provisioning capabilities in SharePoint tooling, because they are super powerful for you to automate provisioning of stuff, automate configuration of existing sites or governance on the existing sites as well. Now, what about SharePoint Framework? Like typically, we are not giving any exact numbers because we don't have that permission yet from Jeff Teeper, and we quite rarely actually give exact numbers on exact things in Office 365 in general. But this gives you a perspective from last September to today. That's actually until Sunday, so 2 days before today. The growth on the left side, the usage per user, and then on the right side, the usage per tenants. And it's interesting to see that we're seeing an even deeper growth on the usage per tenant, which seems to be, based on our data, show that more and more developers are actually using SharePoint Framework in the developer tenants, and that will then generate more usage on the left side. So basically, end user usage slightly later on when they actually start deploying their customizations on the production tenants. But really cool to see the adoption growing so fast, and SharePoint Framework is already by far the most widely used customization model in Office 365. So it's by far the most widely adapted and widely used customization model in Office 365. So super cool to see that. Now, reminders on the guidance, AKMS SPDev docs or docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. That's where the SharePoint documentation is nowadays. MSDN has been already shut down, unless I'm mistaken. There might be some sections which haven't been yet shut down, but MSDN will be completely shut down pretty soon, and everything is transformed to the docs platform. So from here you can find all of the relevant guidance around the SharePoint framework, SharePoint add-ins, solution guidance, schema definitions. If you're still doing on-premises, which is completely acceptable as well, feature framework guidance is available here as well. So all of the old stuff and the new stuff is found from one centralized location. The second thing which we're falling slightly behind to our engineering resourcing challenges is that you can always open up a issue and report towards us using the AKMS SPDev issue list. This is the SPDev docs repository and the issue list over there if you find a generic issue around SharePoint development. And this is mainly because our SharePoint Online support does not have expertise to actually help you if you have a developer-oriented question. So that's why they cannot really help you on that. So we're trying to help you directly from engineering side, but we're slightly struggling due to the high demand of and the amount of questions. Now, if you have interest and time and availability and you want to help us on this journey and helping others in a community, please go to this issue list. And if you find a question which you can actually help, which you know how to answer that question, help us by commenting on the actual issues, and that will be highly appreciated by our team as well. Now, moving on things. Quick update on the user voice. There's no actual updates in the top 10 list of these user voice, except the votes are slightly up. And the number one item is absolutely still the managed metadata term store operations using the REST API and taxonomy API. And something what I told actually last week also, I think I mentioned this last week in the SPFX community call. We're now looking into making this happen. Now, when? That's a different discussion. I can't promise you a date, I can't promise you a timeline, but we're actively looking into making taxonomy REST API available, because we also need it by ourselves. Now, one of the key reasons why this has been slightly delayed is that it's just a matter of resources as well. Now that our baseline, meaning group associated team sites and modern team sites and communication sites, are already in a decent experience, we can start realigning our resources to this to document management operations and ECM operations. So ECM and document management operations will be the next big thing where we're concentrating and improving in the future. So looks to be really promising that we'll get this one, but I can't give you an exact date. Like mentioned, I will try to keep you up to date on the hunch, but I can't really want to speculate, because immediately if I speculate too much, I will get burned internally in our engineering as well, because we can't promise you a date until we actually have a date. The second item in this list, which is gaining internally also interest and is gaining a lot of votes, is the .NET Core version of CSUM. We can, for example, move to PowerShell core version of SharePoint Online PowerShell until we have actually done this. So we are highly aware of that requirement. We know that it's number 3 in the list, and it's again waiting for resources to make that happen. Whenever we get to SharePoint 2019. Okay, anyway, so SharePoint Framework library packages was the last thing what I noticed and before I got thrown out. So library packages, we're working on that one. Again, the same guys who are working on that one are needed in the more critical things right now, but we're looking into making that happen relatively soon, and many other items in this user voice list as well. Now, let's go to the next slide. Quickly, July 2018 summary. Obviously, we released a new version of SharePoint SharePoint Framework 1.5.1 is the latest version. There's new client-side web parts and extension samples which one came out. We're going to see some of those today, or one from Luis, and then other ones, older version, older sample from a SharePoint starter kit from Paolo. Numerous updates on the existing samples, moving them from previous versions to the latest ones, and updated documentation and guidance on the Bmp component sites. There's a new version on the Bmp Js Library, and a reminder on that one. So the classic Bmp JavaScript core library is now deprecated. The Bmp Js library is the one which you should be using. So if you're looking into using the Bmp Js or some Bmp Js capabilities, please use the Bmp Js library because that is now the preference. If you go to our monthly summary, you'll find all of the needed links, all of the guidance of making the transition to happen. Obviously, there's new versions of the Bmp Reusable SharePoint Framework controls for property pane and content, and plenty of other updates. So the SharePoint starter kit being one of them as an example. The documentation is getting better and better based on the contribution, what we get from the community and what we're able to do ourselves as well. Now, on the list of people who've assisted, this is getting, the names are getting smaller and smaller because we're getting, it's going to be a hard time pretty soon to fit this in one single slide. I'm not going to mention all of these people who are on the slides, but thank you so much for your help on this assisting us on keeping up to date on the demand of the open source community and demand of the samples and guidance and changes within the existing projects. The SharePoint community is one of the strongest technology communities out there, mainly because we're willing to share, we're willing to help, we're willing to spend time on assisting others, because we actually get back. The others will help us back sooner or later as well. And it's mind-blowing to see how much people are helping each other, and it's mind-blowing to see what kind of customizations and contributions people are giving us back, which is super valuable. So thank you for your time. These are the number of companies and all of the companies which we have a permission to share in this course and in the slides. So thank you for these companies for letting their employees to spend some time on the open source and contributing back for others in the community. And super valuable for everybody out there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, if your name was on the previous slide, but your company is not here and you would like to have the company here, please contact me, Bert, or Patrick and give us a permission to get your link and a company name mentioned here. So next time when you will have a contribution, we're able to share your company name in this list as well. Good. On the Microsoft side, obviously, a typical list of people. There's some new people here, some old people are already left, but there's typical set of people basically contributing on the Microsoft side. We do have a pretty strong community internally, actively participating on these things as well. A lot of these people are engineering company from organizations, and a lot of them are actually also from MCS, so our internal consulting side of the game as well, and our technical writers and so on. Now, the reminder on the PMP starter kit and the modern experiences, just a reminder on this one. We're not going to now today to a really detailed demo on the starter kit, but Paolo is going to demonstrate some of the capabilities in this one. This is a great starter kit for you to understand what's possible in SharePoint Online in the modern experiences. It is already right now, those web parts which are in the starter kit are the most widely used web parts globally in SharePoint Online, which is pretty cool. So if people are clearly using the starter kit, they're getting excited on the starter kit, and we're getting a lot of valuable feedback on this one as well. We're looking into, on this PMP starter kit, we're looking into making this more easily approachable and for you as well. So by Ignite, there will be a website where you can sign in as a tenant administrator, and you can basically click a button and select what kind of content you want to provision, and then there will be an automatic process to actually get the starter kit installed to any tenant in the future. Right now, this requires a PowerShell execution skills, so you need to execute one PowerShell script as a tenant administrator, and it's going to then configure everything for you. But it's really meant to demonstrate from an end user perspective what is possible in the modern experiences, and also how to implement those things as a developer. So but it's definitely not just for developers, it's also for business analysts and consultants and end users to understand what's possible in here. Now, moving on things. Quick update on the roadmap, high-level update on the roadmap. So 1.6 of SharePoint Framework, ETA is still end of July. We're looking into having one of the SharePoint Framework releases before Ignite. So it might be end of July, it might be early August. We're running slightly out of time, which is pretty typical, to be honest. But we want to make sure that we will get one release between now and Ignite. So that's going to be 1.6, and 1.7 is going to be then in Ignite. In 1.6, we're looking into having Dialog Framework GA. We're looking into having native graph access from SharePoint Framework as a GA. GA means general availability, so it means that it can be used in production, because everybody is asking for these capabilities when trying to make that happen. And supporting React 16, preview of Socket.io, which is something what we demonstrated in some of the community calls, and also having a native Yeoman support for SharePoint 2019. I'm going to talk about SharePoint 2019 in the following slide as well, so don't be scared if it might be delayed for 1.7. 1.7 is scheduled now for Ignite, so that's going to happen end of September. And then by Ignite, we should have some of these Teams capabilities to preview for you, but that's now scheduled for the Ignite release. SharePoint 2019, on that one, let's talk about that one after, well, this is basically a repeat from the previous slide, so sorry for that. I'm going to jump on the following slide. So 2019, on SharePoint 2019, just be super clear on this. This is still preliminary plan, so it is subject to change, but the changes will be pretty minimal for preview release. So preview will happen summer 2018, so relatively soon. I cannot give you a date, but it's going to happen relatively soon, regardless. It's going to use SharePoint Framework 1.4. So anything what is in SharePoint Framework 1.4 from a client-side perspective will work. But it doesn't mean that everything in the server side will work as such. So in SharePoint 2019, it will support modern pages. so modern experiences, modern lists, and everything like that. And it will have a modern theme site. It will not be a group-associated theme site because Office 365 groups are in online, so it will be a modern theme site without the group capabilities. It will have obviously SharePoint group, but it's not the Office 365 group capabilities. Obviously, we'll support communication sites as well. We will support SharePoint Framework extensions, so list view command sets, field customizers, and application customizers into modern pages and modern lists as well. Webhook supported, asset packaging supported, so you're able to deploy your SPPKG files in the app catalog, and everything will be hosted for you automatically, so you don't have to worry about the actual hosting of those assets. The no CDN on the yes section means that there's no Office 365 CDN, because again, we're in on-premises, so we can't really host stuff for you in Office 365 because we're in on-premises. Column formatting will be supported in the modern list and libraries, so that's pretty cool. Tenant scope deployment and ALM APIs are still unclear. We're looking into potentially making them happen. It might be that we're missing the preview, but they will be in RTM, but we'll need to clarify that one still in the engineering. The stuff which will not be in SharePoint 2019 is site designs. Hub sites will not be there, site collection app catalog will not be there, and tenant properties. This tenant properties is the SPFX. Well, it's not technically an SPFX thing, but tenant properties where you can store key value pairs in a tenant level and then use APIs to read them. The site collection app catalog tenant properties will not be there in 2019. But this should clarify you kind of what will be there. And what will not be there, so you're able to start thinking what's the implication of certain things. Good question, good clarification from Luis. So does this mean that no SharePoint add-ins in 2019? No, SharePoint add-ins will be there. We're not taking anything away. So definitely everything what's in 2016 will be in 2019 as well. Classic experience will be there. SharePoint add-ins will be there. Farm solutions will be there. Sandbox solution will be actually there. Code behind Sandbox solution will be deprecated, but it will be there. Deprecation means that it's still supported, but we're not investing anymore on that functionality. So don't get fooled. I concentrated here on the modern capabilities, but obviously all of the classic things will be there still, and nothing is taken away from you. And you as an administrator can control what kind of sites you're actually creating. Are you creating a modern theme site or are you creating a classic theme site? So you can absolutely keep on using classic and farm solutions in them if that is your preference. So don't get confused on that. That's a good comment though, Luis. We need to be more specific and remember to explicitly call those things out. So all good, all good. In general, SharePoint add-ins is 100% supported in SharePoint Online, and we have no plans of deprecating SharePoint add-ins. Vice versa, we're looking into investing on the add-ins model and the ideology of add-ins in the future as well. SharePoint 2019, as you can see, SharePoint 2019 is based on what we have in SharePoint Online. The reason for that one is that SharePoint 2019 is exactly the same code base as SharePoint Online from April 2018. So we've taken the April 2018 internal version from SharePoint Online, and then we ripped off all of the functionalities which cannot work in on-premises, and then we're packaging that as SharePoint 2019. It is a good reminder that it's cloud first. All of the latest and greatest capabilities go always to cloud. So you will not see anything like mind-blowing, oh, from a UI perspective, which is not in cloud. It's always cloud first, and then on-premises the second. Todd is asking, do I have a web page that points all of this information and what will be deprecated? Would be nice to be able to share that with our customers. Absolutely agree on that. I haven't had a time to write that page yet, so it's just a matter of timing and resources. So I'm looking into getting that out relatively soon. This is still speculative, and that's really the challenge in here, and that's why we can openly say it in a community call. The challenge is that really we shouldn't have a speculative page too much in the official documentation. But fair point. I can actually create myself a note, post-it note, where I'm going to add a note to myself that create a page for 2019 dev platform. Good input. because that helps on then communicating what will be there and what will not be there. There clearly has been some confusion on this. Also, feel free to take a screenshot of this one and share it in Twitter. Doesn't really matter. This is not an NDA stuff. Everything what we have in these calls are 100% open to be shared. That's really the whole point of these community calls. Now, let's actually move on away from there. I'm going to answer any questions in the IM window while Luis is starting his demo, but we really need to also go to the demo section, so we will have plenty of time for those as well. So, Luis, you'll be going first. And
okay, thank you.
Excellent. And audio works.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yep, all good. We can hear you. All good.
Okay. Cool. I'm gonna share my screen.
Yes.
So please let me know when you can see it. Okay.
And on Luis's demo around Microsoft Graph custom schema extension usage and SharePoint Framework, one thing to remember is that more and more in the future, we as a Microsoft will keep on pushing the Microsoft Graph as the de facto API structure. Now, right now, currently in 1.5 version of SharePoint Framework, the Graph APIs are not yet officially supported in production, but they will be in the future. And we're looking into making this better and better in the future. So the Graph integration and Graph APIs are super important part of the SharePoint development. But Luis, we can see a screen, so take it away.
Cool. Thank you. That's a good point. So yeah, in this sample, I'm going to show you how we can extend the Microsoft Graph to store our custom data using what is called the Graph Schema extensions and read and update from an SPFX web bar. So, well, sooner than later, likely you're gonna need to store your custom data in Graph entities. A possible business scenario can be to extend user profile with data coming from an HR system, like adding the employee ID or data related with payroll processes or whatever, or like in this sample, extending groups that are being used to work in, for instance, big projects with information like business unit, estimate, budget, or close date, or something like that, information related the bid. So before diving into the code, let's have a quick look to the two different options we have to extend Graph. Actually, everything is pretty well documented in this link on here, and also know that not all the resources are support with custom extensions. So as you can see in this table, these are the resources that we can extend using Graph extension, but pretty much the more common entities as far as I can see. So you have users, you have group, messages, events, and so on. There's a couple of options in order to extend the graph with your custom data. One of them is open extensions, and also we have schema extensions. Open extensions are more lightweight to extend data, and it's just a dictionary with key value pairs, while schema extensions are a more type way to extend data. It's pretty similar, like creating a class with specific properties in code, for instance. So with schema extensions, we can also say that the data in the extension, it's a field first citizen, and you're going to be able to select that field, filtering by that field, and so on, which is not possible with open extensions. So I'm going to show you how we can do it during the demo. Regarding the schema extensions, also know that there's a life cycle of the extension, as you can see here. So when you create the extension, it can be in these three stages: in development, available, and deprecated. And the main difference is that only the owner app, and we'll take a look to what that means in a minute, is going to be able to update the extension in development, or any owner app is going to be available the extension here for any other app. Also, when you create the extension, you're going to define the properties with a specific type, and these are the basic types that you can use. more or less the same basic types in C#, string, integer, and so on. And the good thing is that if you try to update a value with an invalid value in the property, so if you try a string in an integer property, you're gonna get an error directly from the Graph API. So it's much more type using schema extensions. So in order to create an schema extension, I can show you here using the Graph Explorer tool. This is a great tool for working with the Graph API. And to create a schema extension is not possible directly from the SPFX because of the permissions that you have when you are using the Graph HTTP client. We'll talk a bit more regarding permissions in a minute. So in this case, I'm using the Graph Explorer, but basically in order to create the extension, is just create a post to the schema extensions endpoint and provide some information in the body as a JSON object. So you have to define an ID. And there's two different ways to create that ID, and this is also documented on here. It's a bit weird in my opinion, but you have a couple of options. You can use your verified domain and do something like domain underscore and whatever that you want to use. Or you can just set any other name and Graph will generate a prefix auto-generated and it's going to assign to the extension. Keep in mind that in order to get data from that extension, you're going to have to use this ID. So I think it's much more easy if you can provide your domain underscore whatever that auto-generating a prefix. Also, you have to provide a description. Is any description that you want to apply to the extension, and also the owner. This is the client ID of any Azure AD application that is registered in your Azure Active Directory. And this is important because without providing the owner, that's not going to work. So you have to specify an Azure ID app client ID on here. This is one of my apps that I already have registered in Azure Active Directory. Then the target types. So the extension is going to be applied in this case to groups. This is an array, so we can specify all the different entities that we can extend, so group, users, or whatever. And then the list of the different properties with the name and the type. In the sample, we are having these three string, integer, and data properties to show you in the demo. I'm not gonna run the query because I already created the extension. So once the extension is created, we can get the information doing just a get in this same endpoint, and we can using the ID to filter. So you can see here my extension with the specific ID, target type, and the different information, and also the status that by default is set to indent. Okay. Also, when you want to get the information from a specific entity, so for instance, here we are querying a specific group in the Graph API. And as you can see here, I'm getting the ID and display fields that are out-of-the-box fields from the group, but also I'm getting my custom extension. So you can see here the result with the different properties in the custom extension. And also the good thing, as I said before, is that with the schema extension, you can use these fields later to filter data. So we can do things like, okay, get me all the groups in Graph API with the ID, display name, and man extension, but filtering the ones that the business unit in my custom extensions is equals to manufacturing in this case. So we are getting a couple of groups, and obviously if we change that, that's not going to work, and it's not returning any group. So it's a very powerful way to extend information and custom data in the graph entities. So regarding the permission, well, let's take a look to the web part. Actually, this is the web part from the sample. It's already in GitHub. And what we are doing here is, well, is running locally in the SharePoint Workbench. So when we refresh the page, we are just getting the custom extension from the Graph API and just rendering that information in the screen. And obviously we have the update option, so we can say, like now the business unit is retail, and let's increase the estimate budget, and let's change the expected close date, and let's update. So, well, I'm not updating the UI for the demo, but in the console you can see data updated successfully, and if we refresh the page, we're gonna get the new values in the group. And also, if we run the query on here, let me remove that one. Let me see if I'm in the right group. I think it's that one. Yeah, this is the new data, retail and estimated budget and so on. So this is how it works. And in the network, if we take a look to the query that we are doing to get the information, there's we are using the HTTP graph client. So there's a specific bearer token that you can see on here, and if we get that value and decode the token, I already did that with an old token. You can see how this is the Azure Active Directory that is registered in our tenant in order to use the HTTP graph client. So as you can see here in the scope section, these are the permissions that you have in order to use graph. And in this case, at least at some point, the only permissions allow is the read and write all groups, reports, and user read all. For this reason, we can't create a specific custom extension directly from the SPFX. However, what we can do is get the value and update the value in a specific group, as we have the read and write all permissions in the application. Okay. So jumping into the code, this is just an SPFX web part. The web part is pretty simple because it's just loading a specific React component and setting the context to this component. So all the magic is actually happening in the React component. So well, we have some on-change functions. This is just updating the React component state with the different values when you type in the text box and so on, as we had here in the UI. So this is just updating the state on here. And also here, this is not working. As I said, we can't create a schema extension, but I post the code on here because can be useful for future, in case that you can create it from SPFX, or at least you can see how it looks in order to create and use Group Explorer or any other custom app that you want to use. And same if you want to update the user entity, that's not going to work either because the permissions are only for groups. But in this case, we are using groups. So if we take a look to the render method, this is just some text fields with the specific UI that you've already seen in the web part, and a button to update the data. So when the component did mode, when everything starts, we are calling this get custom extension and updating the React state with the value. So the get custom extension is just using the HTTP graph client provided by SPFX in the context, and getting the group ID also from the context, and just running the get request and getting the information in a specific interface, custom interface, and just updating the states. In order to update, it's pretty similar. You can see here the function. So again, we are getting the group ID from, this is the group that is behind the specific site in SharePoint that we are using. So if we jump back here, we have this modern theme site. So as you can see here is the modern theme site and the specific ID. So we are using the Office 365 group behind this SharePoint site. And we just need to do a patch request in this case, specifying the custom extension properties with the value using this JSON format. And we fetch the query to the specific group ID, and everything is just updating. And well, the functionality that you've already seen in the web part. So that's pretty much everything. We can read, we can update custom extension in groups at this point using the HTTP graph client, and I think it's a really powerful way to provide custom information to graph, in this case, to our groups in Office 365. So any question, feel free to pin me in the chat window or GitHub or whatever.
Excellent.
That's all from my side.
Excellent, thanks, Lois. Yeah, so Paolo, you can take over the screen sharing, but while you're doing that, just to kind of reiterate some things here. So obviously the Office 365, extending Office 365 group is an awesome example of a schema extension usage because there's no such object in SharePoint. So in SharePoint, you could actually use stuff like user profile to give additional properties for the user profile property or the individual user. On the other hand, that's only for SharePoint. And what's good about the Office 365 group and schema extensions is that the same extensions then available for other applications as well. So it's not only for SharePoint. User profile properties, as an example for user, are only for SharePoint. None of the other applications will know nothing about that one. So, and there was a good comment, I think it was, I can't remember which one put it, adding a custom schema extensions on the users in Azure AD is a one way of getting around of the limitation of the user profile property string limitation, which is 3,600 characters. I can't remember who actually bought it. Yeah, it was Leo. Thank you. So that's one way of thinking thinking and aligning. Potentially, well, sooner or later we need to do something as an engineering for the SharePoint user profile. Right now, there's a lot of capabilities in SharePoint which are dependent on it. Now, if your solution is already using Microsoft Graph and already has the right scopes, adding your custom properties to the actual user object in Azure AD is more preferable option than doing the same stuff in the user profile. One of the reasons for that is that you can actually automate the Azure AD modifications by using an API. User profile you would have to do one by one within a tenant level because there's no APIs to add custom properties for user profile property, which hopefully makes sense. Me talking a lot, sorry for that. So Luis, thank you, great demo, absolutely great demo. The sample link has been added on the iron window. We'll put it in the video notes as well when the video notes will be in the released in the blog as a blog post. But Paolo, you're there.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. And let's talk a little bit about the extensions and specifically about one extension that we have in the SP Starter Kit. Here you can see the GitHub repo for the Starter Kit, and I just wrote in the chat area the link for your reference. The SP Starter Kit, as Viz already said, is a solution, open source solution sample that we provide based on community effort and full of sample web parts and sample extension. You will have full source code for all of these components. And today we will talk about one specific component, which is the footer extension for communication sites. We call it portal footer. This extension, first of all, let me show you it from an end user perspective, and then we will see how we implemented it in the source code. It's a footer in a modern page. The end users can click on it, and there is a nice moving menu item which will pop up on the screen, providing a bunch of useful links to the end users, including a section called My Links, which is made of a few custom links that an end user can customize for himself or herself. And in fact, by clicking on the Edit button in the UI of the portal footer, you can see there is a dialog window that you can use to edit any of the existing links or to add a new link. For example, I can add a search engine. I can provide the address for bing.com, just to make an example. I can add it. This list of links, if I click on the Save button, will be stored in the user profile service. We just talked about it, and maybe, Visa, we can think about using the graph extension for doing that as well, just as an example. But right now, we use the user profile service in order to share those personal links across multiple site collections within the same tenant from a SharePoint Online perspective. And as you can see now, I have my search engine available in the My Links section of my footer. So now let's see how we can implement such kind of extension using SharePoint Framework. And so let me move to the Visual Studio Code editor. This is the main source code file of the portal footer application customizer. You can find it under the solution folder of the SP Starter Kit, and in the source folder there is the extensions subfolder in which you find the portal footer. Well, the portal footer application customizer is a SharePoint Framework application customizer, which allows us to provide few settings when we configure it on the target site. We have the title of a list that we use to store all of the link items that we have in the footer here. So applications, internal modules, and news are all items that we have in a custom list. And I will explain you where this custom list is stored in a matter of few seconds from now. Moreover, we have a couple of texts for the copyright message and for the support message. And then we have the name of the property, of the custom property that we use in the user profile service to store the My Links of the currently connected user. Once we have the extension configured with those properties, in the onInit method of the extension, we first of all retrieve the URL of the site, of the root site of the hub site in which we are. In fact, we make an assumption. We assume that this extension will be mainly used in a context of a hub site. Actually, we support also this extension in a communication site which is not related to an hub site, but our preferred usage context is the one in the hub site. And that's why we have a function inside the code of this extension which will get the hub site URL. Let me show you what we do inside this function. Using the SharePoint REST APIs, we connect to the current site URL plus the well-known _ API, the website, and we get the hub site data information using this URL. We will get back a response, which I can show you how it is presented. This is a request that I made using Telluric Fiddler. And here you can see we get back a JSON object, which will have a value property, which inside is made of another JSON object. I already got the JSON, and using any of the JSON viewer that you have on the web, here you can see what's inside of that value property. As you can see, we have the hub site name, we have the URL of the main site for the hub, we have the navigation items so that we can see what are the navigation elements for the navigation shared across the site within the same hub, and so on and so forth. What I'm interested in right now is the URL of the site, and in fact, that's the information I use to get the URL of the main site for my hub site. Why am I doing that? Because in that site, I'm storing the list with all of the links so that we can share all of the links across all of the sites in my hub site. That's the basic idea we had to share that information across all of the sites in the hub. Then we set up the Bmp Js library, and we do that using the setup method and providing the base URL for SharePoint, targeting the hub site URL, so that when we will use the Bmp Js library in order to get a reference to the list with all of the custom links, the Bmp Js library will target the hub site URL that we just retrieved using the REST API of SharePoint. Moreover, we collect some useful settings from the properties. We double check to have all of the required properties, and we render the placeholder. And that's the interesting part. In the render placeholders function, we simply retrieve a reference to the bottom placeholder of the page, so the footer basically. And if we have the footer, we load all of the links from the SharePoint list in the hub site, and we render a portal footer control, which will be made of all of the groups of links based on the links we just retrieved from the list, from the configuration list. If I dig into the load links method, you can see here we use Bmp Js. In fact, we do sp.web.lists. We get the specific list we are using to store the links. We get just the properties we need, and we retrieve the top 100 items, which should be enough for a footer. I think so, at least. We order them by group and by title, and we use caching, which is a really killer feature of Bmp Js, because we have out-of-the-box caching through the Bmp Js library without the need to implement our own caching logic. We also use the asynchronous pattern close to the C# one, because I was originally a C# developer, so I really love to do async and await rather than then, but that's my choice. And once I've got the items from the list, I can simply map them to an array which will be made of all of the items with their group, with their title, and with the target URL for every single item. Moreover, because I have my custom links, optionally, I could have my custom links in the user profile service. I also use an SP user profile service, which is another type you find in the common folder of this project. And there we have a get user profile property method, which will retrieve from the user profile of the currently connected user a string property, which will be a JSON serialization of an array of links, which will be the my link items. And that's what we do to get, if any, all of the custom links. To be fair, if we don't have at the user profile level a custom property to store the link items, we can continue on running the extension, and we will simply skip the my links section. Once we have done that, we are ready to render the portal footer control, which is a React component, which will do the rendering of all of the items grouped by group. And moreover, we also have the action button for handling the expansion of my footer here. As you can see, I can expand or close this menu using this default button, which will handle the toggling of my item. And inside this component, I have another React element which will do the rendering of every single group of links. That's from an architectural perspective and from a controls hierarchical perspective, thinking about what we do with React. Moreover, whenever the end user wants to edit their own links, their my links, we have an edit links function, which is based on a custom dialog. So inside we use the SharePoint Framework dialog framework. This dialog is shared across multiple extensions that we have in the starter kit. We use this dialog in the portal footer as well as in the Collab footer, which is another footer that we have in this solution and that you can see in action in the HR team site, for example. and as long as the god of network will be with me, I will show you how it behaves. Come on. Loading.
We'll get there. While it's actually loading, let me explain one question. What we debated a long time in the team who was implementing this is that where do we store those personalized links? And we decided to go with the user profile, SharePoint user profile, and not, for example, schema extensions in the me object in Graph, which technically you could have actually saved some information in the me side as well. The reason for that one is that then it's not requiring any Graph scopes. But just as well, you could implement that kind of an option and get that implementation or the personalized links stored inside of the Graph object as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm waiting for the footer. Let me try to refresh. Oh, no, it was there. Too late. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that.
You're too fast.
Yeah, I'm too fast. So this is the Collab footer, and here, as you can see here, I still have the my links, and I still have the links that I had in the other side because they are shared across multiple site collection within the tenant because they are stored in my user profile properties. So back to the source code, my links dialog is a dialog component built using the Dialog framework of SharePoint Framework, and here I simply have a dialog content control. Let me scroll up here. Oops, faster. Okay, this is my dialog content, which is a React component. And inside the content, I simply render all of the stuff I need to provide the editing panel to edit a single link item, so to add or update a single link item, as you can see here, based on the show detailed panel flag, or on the other side, I can show the full list of link items with a command bar on the top and a detailed list to show the full list of items. The settings of the detailed list, for example, the columns I want to show, are defined here with a constant variable, which defines that I want to show the title and the URL column of every single link. Whenever I save, so I hit the save button of my custom dialog, I will simply update a collection of links that will be returned to the consumer application, which will be my extension, and I will be able to store them back in the user profile as a string, as you can see, and as a JSON stringified array of items. And of course, I refresh the list of links. And that's it from a development perspective. And as you can see, using SharePoint Framework, using React, Bmp Js, and all of the services provided by SharePoint Online, you can build pretty nice solutions which really fit in the UI and in the user experience of the modern UI of SharePoint Online.
Now, one thing to mention here before we go to the slides, and we're running out of time, so we need to close up. But can you actually scroll to the footer? Can you scroll down? So this is one of the things which people need to be at the moment still aware. So the footer is kind of a floating. The footer is on top of the content, and this is something which we are currently working on in the engineering. So as part of the matching of the capabilities, what you can do between the communication side and classic publishing, we will absolutely get you also a non-floating header and non-floating footer, meaning kind of a footer which is inside of the content. So it's not on top of the content. So all of that is now under development. Again, I can't give a timeline, exact timeline, but it is under development and should be coming sooner or later. So it is something which we know that is a gap, because right now, if you scroll down, hide the extended one, but you can clearly see the challenge of the footer. The reason why this one is extended is basically that it can have kind of a mega footer capability, and you can always ask it to show additional information and then hide it. It was just my design of trying to figure out how we can do classical publishing site experiences in the communication side. Now, like noted on the on the previous URLs. So the starter kit is available in GitHub. Say no to megas. And in the GitHub, you can actually start using the code. You can pull down the code. You can reuse the code. You can repackage code. You can do whatever you want with all of these assets. It is all free MIT license. You don't need to worry about using anything out of that. It's just as well, you can use it in your own implementations. Now, can any of the BMP starter kit be deployed on SharePoint 2016? And the answer is unfortunately no, because the limit is the SharePoint Framework 1.1, like you, Daniel, noted. We're looking into, we just were talking about the fact that we will actually split SharePoint starter kit to multiple packages in future. One of the packages will be then targeted for SharePoint 2019, so you can have some of the web parts in SharePoint 2019, even though some of the web parts are using the latest and greatest and preview capabilities. So potentially we might actually have 3 different solution packages, one for preview capabilities, so targeted release tenants, one which is for SharePoint Online, which is not working in on-prem, and one which is containing the stuff which is working in on-prem plus SharePoint Online. That is adding additional complexity on the deployment, but we'll probably make that happen so you can really easily reuse those web parts which are available inside of this package. Pew is asking what's supported in 2082. Which was a Twitter discussion from last week. Yes, I think I disclosed that there will be 2082. Luckily, actually, Jeff Deeper confirmed that as well, so that was a good discussion. Anyway, have a look on the SharePoint starter kit. We'll keep on evolving that. Give us feedback. We'll keep on evolving the documentation on that. And please keep on using GitHub, social media, user voice, all of these channels to let us know what's working, what's not working. If you're interested in doing demos in any of these calls by yourself, just let us know. And let's stay in touch. But thank you, Luis. Thank you, Paolo. For great demos, AKMS, SBPMP, the one URL to remember for additional information around the SharePoint developer community. Thank you, everybody. The recording will be available within 24 hours in the typical YouTube channel. Thank you very much.